All right. Well, hello. Oh, and I froze the moment we started. Everything is trying not to work today. Okay. Hello. Can you hear me out there? Can everyone hear me? Oh, okay. I can hear it on. It sounds fine there. Hello. Well, I guess we'll just continue then. Joining me today is Peter. It's going to be the two of us because Neslig is. He's back over on your end, I think. He left my country
Yes,
and has returned to yours.
yes, he should be somewhere around here.
Yeah.
Uh, First of all,
Yeah.
my apologies. I had a Windows update that apparently uh, made everything go away. I don't have a camera anymore. I didn't have a microphone anymore. I had to reinstall everything. So great, Microsoft. That's real cool.
Yeah,
So
I do remember when I used what was it, the Microsoft Video on my old laptop when there was an update. It killed it for whatever reason. It was just, you know,
well, so far every single time I've had an update, I will lose my mic for some reason, and I have
mm,
to um, reset my mic in OBS. But this time, my video card can't even detect my camera, which is weird.
that is odd.
Yeah. So
Hmm. Well,
we
we're
shall
here
see.
now,
Yes,
which is
we
all
made
that
it.
matters.
We made it.
So,
Only
everybody,
only 18 minutes late.
hey, better late than never, right?
Well,
So, welcome. We have Brian Stevens. Triceratops is not a Sauroptian dinosaur. I don't even know how to pronounce that. And Eric Davis. Peter, do you see this one? Starts with a K.
let's see what.
The person down here, like third from the bottom, name starts with a K in the live chat.
Yes.
I have no idea how to pronounce that.
Nor do I.
What
So
language is that?
I'm guessing Hungarian, maybe Polish.
Okay,
I have no
fascinating.
idea.
Well, welcome from over there. We are glad to have you. So, uh, Nestle's on his Christmas break, and we're here. You know, we're still at work while Nestlig is on vacation. Um, and let's see, I found a new video since we finished the Haranyaya video that Camilla found for us. Um, this one is I don't. This one is not going to have nearly as much fun music as the Haranyaya video did,
No.
or
It
such
also
awesome graphics.
it also isn't as fun as the thing that I was sent. So during one of Arn's streams, we had a guy who came right out of the corner. Arn is too afraid to debate me. Well, yeah, who are you? So I said, if you want Arn to talk to you, send me an email. And he said he had evidence for the flood. And
Mm,
so I said, email your evidence to me, and then I'll forward it to Arn, and then Arn can decide whether or not he wants to talk to you about this. So he sent me
hmm
an email with nothing in it, just two topics that he wanted to debate Arn on, and
Yeah.
I replied and I said, you were supposed to send me your evidence, and this evidence, Jackson, was simply stunning.
Okay.
I thought I have seen it all. What I had never seen were um, fossilized testicles, which
Okay.
which people like you and me would refer to as geodes because they were, according to him, crystallized testicles. They looked pretty, and so the spikes inside would kind of explain why it hurts if people kick you in the balls. But
Well,
uh,
maybe.
another thing was a giant fossilized penis, which was,
Hmm.
I think, a couple of dozen feet tall, and a fossilized elephant, about a mile long and about half a mile high.
Is this like a mud fossil kind of guy?
This is kind of Mud Fossil 2.0 because these guys
Yeah.
don't just use a feather to point out things on Google Earth. They actually went there. And they stood
Okay.
in the eye sockets of the fossilized elephant.
Okay.
And yeah,
Well,
honestly, I was at a loss for words. I don't think so. If it looks like this, it has to be this. Fossilized kidneys, just pebbles
mm-hmm.
in the shape of the kidney. Pebbles in the shape of a heart obviously are a heart. Stuff like that. So I honestly I didn't even forward it to Aaron because this is lucky for
Yeah, it just
me.
sounds like a mud fossil guy.
Yeah, lucky for me, I still do have a channel called Dumpster Fires, so I'm going to invite him to talk to me over there and see what happens. I
Ah,
I
okay.
don't even want that on my regular channel. I can't justify
I
that.
how many views or how many subscribers does Mud Fossil have? 214,000. That's so many. I hope those are all
Those are hate
just
watchers.
people. I hope those are all hate watchers. I
Yeah,
really do.
or people
Because
who like
otherwise,
or
oof.
people who like bad comedy.
As I think a long time ago, I remember, like, um, oh, what was his, whoops, what was his name? One of the early creationists, G-Man. I remember a lot of people would watch him, but they would almost all be hate watchers.
Still subscribed. He just
Does he
went
even
live.
make
He just
any?
went live, by the way.
He does. So he does still make content. Okay.
Yes,
I
yes.
haven't heard or seen anything from
His
him in
his
a very
channel
long time.
his channel is now named Exposing Shani for Christ or something because yeah,
Okay.
that's what rejection of a married woman does to you. I think G-Men would have liked that. I don't know.
Hmm. Weird. Well, so today we are going to go to Stephen Meyer, who is shilling his newest book, which I think came out 2 years ago, I think. 2 or 3 years ago, something like that. It's pretty recent. It is titled Return of the God Hypothesis. And this book is basically about how science has revealed the creator to us. Once again, after we went through, according to the intelligent design proponents, a, a time when all of science was dominated by materialism and atheistic heathenry and all that sort of stuff. And now God is back, thanks to the wonders of science. But evolution's still fake, by the way. So, not sure about that one.
How is it that science reveals God and none of us can see it?
Well, you're not reading the right papers, Peter, or the right books. Because you have hardened your heart, something or other. Uh, and
That's
that's why.
probably it.
Yeah.
I've got one of those hearts that I just talked about. Just a pebble that
Heart
hardened.
shaped rock
Yeah.
shaped heart. um, so Meyer's book, was I haven't read it yet, and I really have no desire to read it. I read Darwin's Doubt, and that was about as much of him as I could handle. And we talked about that book ad nauseum uh, well, really, we're giving it a deep dive in Rocks Volume 2, the chapter I just finished and sent off to RJ. Has a deep dive on Darwin's Doubt as well as its modern acolytes like Gunter Beckley. who I wrote a couple of scripts for Professor Dave. And so if you want to see some videos deeply debunking Meyer and Gunter Beckley, then go check those out over on Professor Dave's channel. They're really good videos. And I say that because I co-wrote all of them. So this book talks about how, in addition to Darwin's Doubt and Signature in the Cell, which was his book from I think, what was it, 2008, something like that. It was because Darwin's Doubt came out in 2013, and Signature in the Cell came out before that. So Meyer's kind of pulling these together with like physics and other sciences to say, aha, modern science has revealed God and cast out the the evil atheists and so on and so on. And so what's kind of interesting about this, in my opinion, is that even if it were the case that science has revealed God, what is absolutely not happening is none of the intelligent design proponents are contributing to that, because none of them, not Stephen Meyer, not Casey Luskin, not Jonathan Wells, well, he's dead now, but none of the living ones are, and Gager, it's another one, none of them are contributing to the forward movement of science. None of them. And so all this work presumably is being done by what I guess, a bunch of regular scientists who accept evolution and Big Bang cosmology, in the old age of the Earth. So they're the ones who found out that God exists, I guess, which, okay. Good for them. So, Maya Atkinson, hello. Welcome to the show. Can you quickly debunk the fossilized foot of a cowboy? Oh, you're talking about the boot. It's not fossilized. It just has it's calcified because it was under an area where you had water that contained calcium. What is it? Is it calcium carbonate? I think. I believe calcite. Yeah, calcium carbonate, and basically it hardens, and then it encased the boot, so it wasn't fossilized. It was just encased in this, it was like caked in this calcium carbonate that was transported by water, so it wasn't really fossilized. But anyway, so all right, so without further ado, are we ready to start watching this video?
We should be. Oh, people are
All right.
asking what was that beat? Yeah, for some reason the video started on my end, and I couldn't find it fast enough. I had to kill it. So this stream is just all about how not to stream. So don't do as we do. Do what you are supposed to do. Okay, let's go to the video.
Hey, Denver Canada Wing says, "I'm here. You can start now." Well, you are just in time because we are starting the video. Right?
We are. And I'm just checking so I'm not starting the wrong video because everything goes wrong. So let's see if we can do it.
Wonderful to be here. I'm going to be speaking today about The Return of the God Hypothesis, my recent book, with a Cambridge twist.
I can't hear the video. They might be able to. So they could hear it out in the YouTube space. I just couldn't hear it in here, basically. This is what happened. We're not losing much. That is true. I never lose by not listening to Stephen Meyer. Which, well, brief aside, while we're waiting, Stephen Meyer has really become a lot more popular than most of the other people at the DI. Michael Behe enjoyed some fame for a while. William Dembski also kind of did for a little bit, kind of early 2000s. Behe's fame kind of extended a little bit further into, I think, the early, like the 2010s, but you really don't see that much of him anymore. And his book, Darwin Devolves, that came out a couple years ago or a few years ago, didn't make much of a splash. And I think in part that's because he went on Dr. Dan's channel over at Creation Myths, and they had a discussion about, you know, what is the, or sorry, was it Darwin Devolves or was it Edge of Evolution? What was his most recent book? Michael Behe books. What was his? Was it Darwin Devolves? That may be it. Yes, it was Darwin Devolves. Okay, that was 2019. Okay, so 2019, this book comes out, and the whole point is that it's basically like showing what evolution is not capable of doing. So his kind of primary theses in the book were that evolution can't, produce complex structures in biology, which is kind of always his argument. I mean, that's kind of that's what made him famous, was the irreducible complexity argument that he pioneered in Darwin's Black Box, which was published back in the late 90s, which argued that the bacterial flagellum is an irreducibly complex system, which it isn't. It's built up of a series of proteins that all function, that their evolution did not rely on all of them being there initially. They're kind of built on top of each other, and the genes that are involved in building the flagellar systems are duplicates of each other. So they've had time to duplicate and diversify, and and give rise to different functions. So how's it going, Peter?
I love Alex Markel's question. Why is the American government paying for music
Peter?
for You can't hear me? Hello? Hello? Okay, this is becoming weird.
Well, okay. Anyway, any questions for anybody in the live chat? How is everyone doing today?
Hello?
Has anybody
Test
seen
1,
any good
2.
movies lately?
Test 1, 2.
Sorry, I remember what I was talking about now. Despite Behe enjoying some fame, he went on. You can hear Peter. Could nobody hear me? Can no one hear me? Can you hear me? Oh, okay. We can hear both. I don't hear Peter. I can't hear Peter if he's talking. Peter, if you're saying something, can you type it to me in our private chat? Oh, I can hear you now. Yep, I hear you.
Hold on. The weird thing is, something is wrong with everything right now. So
Okay.
my biggest problem now is that I'm not sure if you can hear the video. So let me play the videos.
Yep, play. Yep.
Yeah, you can't because I changed my microphone. Hold on, let me check this because it seems my virtual cable isn't working. Okay.
Well, so Behe went on Dr. Dan's channel, and they chatted a couple years ago, or a few years ago now, I think, about what exactly the edge of evolution is. And Behe's book has now come out, and he's supposedly telling us what the edge of evolution is. But no one really took his book very seriously, and it kind of faded out pretty quickly. No one really, I haven't seen anybody talk about it recently. I don't think anybody really cares about it. I've seen more
Okay.
discussion of Luskin's book a little bit, The Return of the God Hypothesis, but I still haven't seen that much about it, because even though we are all familiar with these guys, they really don't make that big of a splash outside of like the intelligent design and the creation evolution debate sphere. They really don't. The general public doesn't really know or care much about intelligent design advocates. There is, I think, a lot of people are familiar with, for instance, the Creation Museum and the Ark Park. A lot of like just normies know about that, but most people really don't know about the Discovery Institute or really care about it. Um, Even if they might be aware of the term intelligent design, but they don't have much of an impact. So basically, they're the a small or a smaller part of the kind of anti-evolution group. You could say the much bigger force of anti-evolution comes from the young Earth creationists. A smaller portion comes from the intelligent design advocates, and a smaller kind of force comes from the old Earth creationists. But even still, like pretty much nobody, the old Earth creationists are more or less like entirely represented by Hugh Ross and Fazal Rana, and that's kind of about it. And I like Fazal Rana. We had him on the channel about a month ago, I think. Right at about a month ago. It was on my birthday, November 14th. But there just aren't that many of them. If you guys haven't read it, Dr. Rana did write a really good book, which is titled Dinosaur Blood in the Age of the Earth, in which he talks about the geochemical mechanisms for the preservation of soft tissues in dinosaur fossils, as well as the fossils of other. Oh, I heard it. I heard that, Peter. Oh, I don't hear anything now. Anyway, so well, this video itself is about an hour. I think it's like right at an hour. So, it's going to take us probably a couple of episodes to get through it. And then once Nestle comes back, then he will talk about the phylogenetics of crocodilians. So that'll be fun. Or I think Pseudotsuchia kind of more broadly. So that'll be cool. He'll tell us all about the evolutionary history of them. Has anybody read any good books recently? Anything that anybody would recommend? Any good books from anybody? The book I'm reading right now.
Yes. Hey, can you hear me?
Yeah, I can hear you.
Okay, finally. Okay, I have no clue. I had to reset pretty much everything in OBS because everything is off. But I think I'm now at a point where I have my sound settings back. So all I'm still missing is my camera in the usual way, but we should be ready to start the video.
Okay.
Yeah.
All right. Oh, well, the video screen went black.
Yes. Yeah, because I set it back to the start.
Okay.
So
all right. Well, all right. Then let's get to it.
Let's hit it.
Uh-huh.
Great. Now I can't hear it.
Nearly all of the major events and discoveries that have been made. There we go. Why does it do that? Don't know.
See, he's having
voice recognition software.
It's too
good.
Everybody.
Yeah. So
we're getting everyone involved in the technical difficulties. I like that. That's at least it's not me, just me.
Yeah.
I've just been realizing that many of the really significant discoveries that have been made that are bringing the God question back into the center of the culture because of scientific work have been made here. And nearly the whole story that I told in the Return of the God hypothesis could be told here. Caltech and California had some things to do with it too, but it's pretty exciting. And so for me, it's been kind of a great opportunity to reflect on God's providence in my life and having brought me here. I felt a call to work on this very topic and to develop this case. And so it's been really fun just to prepare this talk.
If I remember correctly.
Cambridge can be a very intimidating place. And when I first arrived, we found out there were all these things that we didn't know. And we kept running into this phrase, well, it's not the done thing. And the question we wanted to ask was, well, where do you find out where the done thing is done? Because there was no orientation material. So the very first high table dinner in my college, I arrived maybe 30 seconds late, but the bells were ringing it was 7 bells, and our porter, who was named, I kid you not, Mr. Monument, came out in his bowler cap, and as I was hurrying to get into the high table dinner, he shouted across the quad, "Meyer, you're late!" Which terrified me. I thought I'd really messed up no one cared when I sat down, so that was fine. But it was intimidating.
Yeah,
then at the dinner, they served these little, at the dinner I was seated across kitty corner from the master of the college, which was kind of intimidating, and I was just a wet behind the ears American student, and I just arrived, and I was only doing a master's degree, and they served these little tiny Cornish game hens, and so I had gotten good instructions about how to make sure I did my manners right, and I was trying to cut them, and as I pressed too hard on one side of the Cornish game hen, it skittered across the table right to the master's plate. And I was mortified, and I thought, well, this is surely going to be the end of my Cambridge career. And he looked up and he said, "Well, don't worry about it, son. There's no meat on it anyway."
Here, Peter, pause for a second. That story would be a little more endearing if Meyer wasn't part of a group of Christian nationalists who were trying to return theocracy to the U.S. So it'd be a little more endearing. But anyway, all right, we can keep going.
The chicken was just like Meyer's science, not any meat on it. Sorry.
True. Oh, I thought you were going to say skittering away from him.
Yeah, that too.
So it was a rather intimidating start, but it wasn't just not knowing the done thing that was intimidating. It was also ideologically intimidating. So at one of the first seminars in our department, we adjourned then to the pub to discuss, and there was this. There were several people in our program who had been to Ivy League schools, which was also intimidating because I went to a small college out in the West. And one of them, this guy from Yale, decides that he's going to really impress our Cambridge supervisors. And he announces that recently, because of his deep investigations, he had become an atheist. And this really hip young supervisor in our department leaned across the table and he said in a loud voice that everyone could hear, he said, "Well, of course you're an atheist, but what else are you that makes you interesting?" So I decided I was going to not share my worldview, at least not right out of the chute. But interestingly, that same supervisor in tutorials about Newton told me, wagged his finger at me, and he said, "If you miss Newton's theism, you've missed everything." And even though my department was dominated by people who had an atheistic or materialistic or some sort of secular worldview, as far as I knew, there were no Christian lecturers or professors in the department.
Here, pause for a moment. So again, what you have to remember is that Britain is, I believe, proportionally more non-religious than the U.S., which is kind of ironic considering that they have a governmental tie to the church, right? The connection between Anglicanism or Anglicism and the crown is obviously very strong, and the crown is the head of the government, at least now in they have
a
what would you call it, a spokesperson kind of capacity. What'd you say, Peter?
Yeah, they have a national religion, obviously, which
Right.
is the Anglican Church,
Right.
which also so the Grand Poobah, I forgot his name, uh, has a seat in the House of Lords.
Right.
So
So let's see. I'm curious what the actual religiosity, according to, trying to see. Uh, I'm trying to. What is there something that's just like Pew Research or something? Anyway, it seems like a pretty substantial, around 50%, according to most of these, is non-religious. So around 50% of British people. Well, see, this one says only 25%. Um, it seems like most of these are saying, okay, they're either saying like 50% is religious or 50% isn't religious. Oh, this says, okay, here we go. According to Wikipedia, this says Christians are 46%, no religion is 37%. Then okay, so Islam is the next highest one at 6.5. Okay, so pretty much everybody is either Christian or non-religious. So a bit over a third. So yeah, a bit over a third are non-religious, and then a bit under half are Christian.
half of
Whereas,
those are non-practicing Christians, I think.
sure, sure. So right, so right, they're not necessarily like fundamentalists or something like that. So
Nope.
by contrast, I want to see what is um, U.S. religion, what statistics? I guess statistics. Religion in the U.S. according to Wikipedia, also as of 2023, per the Gallup poll, we have 33% Protestant, 22% Catholic, 11% Christian unspecified, and then no religion is 22%. So there are as many people who are not, well, actually, if you count no answer, I mean, if you count no answer and no religion together, that's 25%. But if you leave no religion by itself, it's 22%. So there are as many, according to this 2023 Gallup poll, the percentage of the U.S. that is non-religious is equal to the percentage that is Catholic. So that's a lot. It's a lot of people. So again, the point is simply there are more non-religious people as a percentage in the UK. So what he's saying here is not particularly surprising or insightful, right? So, and that bit about, oh well, Newton was a theist, like, well, yeah, of course he was. He lived in a time when pretty much everybody was a theist. This is not particularly surprising. That's why I find it very silly when people say things like, oh well, all of science was invented by Christians or Jews or what have you. It's like, okay, well, much of history has occurred in times when you couldn't not be religious, basically, where you were stoned or flayed or what have you for not being religious. So saying that is not really saying anything at all. So whatever. Anything you want to add on that, Peter?
Yeah, I mean, a lot of science also comes from Islamic people, especially
It
when it
did.
comes when
Yes.
it comes to cosmology. I mean, lots of the stars were named by Islamic people.
Oh,
Plus,
absolutely. Physics, math. Yeah,
yeah.
absolutely. Optics. There was a famous book that was titled Optics. I can't remember the name of the guy who wrote it, but it was during the Islamic Golden Age, and so Islam was basically or Islamic individuals basically the owners of a lot of the knowledge of the world. So Baghdad
Mm-hmm.
was one of the major knowledge centers of the world. They had actually saved some works from like Plato and Aristotle that had been lost in the West. And then when they were conquering North Africa and they came through Morocco, crossed the Strait of Gibraltar, went up into Spain, and they kind of recontacted people in the West in a different way. There was this exchange of ideas and whatnot, and so a lot of these documents were reintroduced when they had been lost from
Mm-hmm.
Western culture. So yeah, absolutely. It's the Islamic Golden Age was extremely important, in the history of science. So yeah, absolutely.
Yeah. It's a weird thing that Christians these days will say, well, okay, but this scientist, he was Christian. That scientist, he was Christian. Yes. Guess what he didn't do? He never provided scientific evidence for God. None of them. Ah, shut up. We've had enough trouble without you peeping around. My parrot wants to butt in again.
There was a it was, oh, I can't remember what his name was. If anybody in the live chat remembers the guy's name, there was a French I don't know what you call him, naturalist, whatever, who took Newton's laws and basically came up with the concept of determinism. Newton had actually kind of foreshadowed determinism by writing in Principia. He basically was like, okay, well, yeah, it's true that my laws basically provide a mechanistic process by which all the different bodies in the universe move around, but something had to get them started in the first place. There had to be a prime mover initially, so it doesn't really matter that everything was deterministic afterwards. I mean, it kind of does, though. I think it has some very interesting theological implications, but anyway, all right, we can keep going.
We're very honest about the Christian origins of modern science. And there was evidence of it all around. And so even though I felt outnumbered, I took comfort and encouragement from all the markers, all the signs all around me of this deep Christian inspiration for science. And it wasn't just at Cambridge, of course. One of the key founders of modern science, someone that Newton said, Newton used to say that it was upon Kepler and Galileo's shoulders that he stood. And Kepler said, I was merely thinking, speaking of his work in astronomy, he said, I was merely thinking God's thoughts after him. Since we astronomers are priests of the highest God in regard to the book of nature, it benefits us to be thoughtful, not of the glory of our minds, but rather above all else, the glory.
Okay, so like, again, yes, okay. Again, these, pretty much everybody in the West was Christian of some flavor or another, either Protestant or Catholic or what have you, for, again, hundreds to thousands of years at this point. So it's not particularly surprising that the Christians are going to be the ones who come up with everything in science. I mean, that's absolutely true. This just isn't a very surprising or interesting point that you're making about history. If everyone is a member of this thing, then of course that thing's going to come from, this group. Like that's not really surprising. Now it makes sense that a lot of people were doing science, to glorify God, to understand nature, because you have in different religions, you have the idea of natural theology, which is basically that you have different means of interpreting the world, which function together to understand how we should live our own lives. So you have like the religious aspect of God's word, and then on the other hand, you have nature's word, and you have these together, along with observations on what we would now call psychology of people, and that functions together as natural theology to determine how we should interact with each other and how we should structure society. And then of course everybody has different ideas of what natural theology necessarily entails. Do we interpret God's word this way? Do we interpret it a different way? How do we interpret these certain commandments, things like that? I mean, that's what, to an extent, the Talmud is about, right? The Talmud is a collection of documents that are interpretations of the Hebrew Bible, and there's not one simple agreement on, like, okay, you have to interpret it this way. No, there's going to be, some people interpret this way, some people interpret it this way. There's going to be splintering off of different groups and whatnot. But anyway,
I'm a little bit surprised of him saying, I was merely thinking God's thoughts after him.
Yeah, it's
how would he know God's thoughts?
Yeah, that's a good point. It's a little he's kind of up on his high horse saying, I'm thinking God's thoughts.
Yeah.
I mean, I guess he could say he's being just what would be the word for it? just poetic, I guess you might say. He's just being poetic with in saying that he's figuring out how nature works. He is thinking God's thoughts, which okay, well and good.
Yeah, the problem is with Christian nationalists these days, they also think that they know God's thoughts. They're acting on, and their
That's
God
true.
always agrees with them, even though
I
they disagree
yeah.
amongst each other.
I was actually reading a paper just today on how Christian fundamentalists, so this is like young Earth creationists, and people like Stephen Meyer here, how biblical literalists are much more likely to be extremely punitive in with regard to the justice system, far more so, and particularly white biblical literalists
Mm-hmm.
are much more likely to be extremely punitive with regard to the Justice Department compared to uh, non literalists, and interestingly, Black literalists are also much less likely to be extremely punitive, probably because of the history that Black people have had to endure here in the U.S. So,
Yeah.
okay,
Glory
we
of
can keep going.
God. And some of you may have found or seen, there's a wonderful book by a Baylor professor who's recently passed away, Rodney Stark, about the scientific revolution, and it's titled
Mm-hmm.
For the Glory of God. This was the inspiration for modern science. And
Mm-hmm.
we saw this a bit yesterday when I was talking about John Ray and his book, The Wisdom of God Manifested in the Works of Creation, and how the title itself was merely a paraphrase of the famous passage in the book of Romans. For since the creation of the world, God's invisible qualities, his eternal power,
Mm-hmm.
and as it was previously translated, divine wisdom, have been clearly seen, being understood from what has been made. So the
Okay.
inspiration for science, this whole, what we call the natural theological tradition,
Yep,
was
there you go.
not
See.
a deviation or a side
Mm-hmm.
eddy in the scientific enterprise. It was the
Mm-hmm.
very inspiration for science itself, to
Mm-hmm.
understand what God had made, to understand more about his
Mm-hmm.
qualities, his attributes, by studying what he had made.
Mm-hmm.
And I mentioned yesterday that Ray was at St. Catherine's College, and what an extraordinary thing it was to just recently find that out and have a sense of divine providence in bringing us back to the very place where natural theology started and where I
Peter,
started in my studies, and to find
Peter, pause for a moment. You know what I think is divine providence? I think it is divine providence that that Charles Darwin himself occupied the exact same quarters, I think, at that university that uh, Paley occupied decades before. I can't think of anything more like deliciously, poetically ironic than that. I don't know. Anyway, just want to
Yeah.
point that out.
It's also when you go back in time, a lot of things weren't explained yet. So people still
True.
had a lot of stuff that they could attribute to God having created it. Uh, Science has advanced a little then. And
Yeah.
with everything
Yeah.
we've explained through science, it never was God did it, right?
Yeah, I haven't seen any papers yet that use God did it as an
Yeah, well,
explanation or are in the
Jackson,
results and discussion or
you
hmm?
never read the paper our dear friend Otangelo wrote, did you?
I did read it.
Oh, see?
I don't consider that a scientific work though, or
Yeah,
or
okay.
or the journal it published in scientific at all. It was a pay to play journal, so you know. Um,
I just
but
want I just wanted to bring it up so that there are pieces of paper on which it is written.
correct, yeah.
But a paper is
Um,
not always a paper in the sense that it is a paper, though it's paper.
Right. It wasn't peer reviewed. It was
Mm-hmm.
never peer reviewed. There were no scientists who looked this over before it was published in this journal because all you have to do to publish in this journal is just pay them money. So, you know, it shows up on the what like the predatory science like list of journals or whatever, which I thought was pretty funny. Um, yeah, again, Myers, he's just not saying anything really interesting here. He's just kind of saying, the scientists who found out a lot of early stuff in science were Christians. That's true. And they were doing science to glorify God. Okay.
Mm-hmm.
So what? Uh, if you so one example is like, you know, Newton, when he developed the universal law of gravitation, right? It was kind of the spooky action at a distance stuff, right? He didn't have an idea of what exactly gravity was. It just seemed to be a force acting between two massive bodies. That's what gravity was thought, right? And then as time goes on, it turns out, okay, well, that's a way of looking at it. You also can look at it in terms of gravity is the curvature of space time, and the curvature of space time is caused by bodies having mass. So that mass causes the curvature of space time. And so there's nothing, God is not needed in any part of that. It's all very mechanistic. And that's why Meyer here is rejects evolution, right? Evolution is a mechanistic explanation for the origin and diversification of biodiversity on this planet. That's why he hates it. That's why he hates evolution. He spent his entire life um, attacking evolution. He's written book after book after book arguing that evolution doesn't happen, that it can't explain whether it's the Cambrian or cells, or it can't explain proteins, or whatever. That's all he does. So like, of course this guy is going to say that science glorifies God when he doesn't even like science. He hates science.
Mm-hmm.
So all right, we can keep going.
Out that he and I had been at the same college, the college from which we had had purchased the properties, which you'll see today. So this natural theological tradition here was very deeply rooted,
Mm-hmm.
and you saw this in the work of the earliest scientists. There's a little statue, and this is something I'm showing you some things that you'll want to see as you're walking around Cambridge, and which we will spotlight in the self-guided walking tours that we have produced for you to take with you. And this is a statue of a man named William Harvey. He was a physician. He had a very long life for the time period. And in the early 17th century, he was the first person to prove the circulation of the blood. And he did so by doing a whole series of very ingenious experiments. And I know we have a lot of physicians here. We always seem to attract to insiders briefing. So lots of physicians, software developers, and engineers. Because in all three of those professions...
Isn't that odd? Isn't it odd that it's those three professions? Now, if you think about it, it's not at all surprising that it's those three. The reason is what's called the Salem hypothesis, which I think is, as much a hypothesis as the theory of gravity. The Salem hypothesis is basically the idea that engineering attracts intelligent design proponents and young Earth creationists because they work top down, not bottom up. So everything for engineers, software designers, and physicians who are just engineers for people, they all work top down. They don't work bottom up. So what they deal with is complexity, but they don't start with how did we go from no complexity or less complexity to complexity. They start with the top of complexity and say, oh, well, things couldn't be less complex than they are now, or you couldn't remove something from this system without the whole thing falling apart. There's no way for that to work. So that's why you see so many creationists be like dentists or doctors or really engineers. It's those are the or lawyers. You see a lot of lawyers too, but it's really those are the major professions that they occupy. So I'm sure he's going to give an explanation that's like, oh, it's because they're trained to look for design or something like that, which might be true for an engineer, but it's not true for a physician. I don't know. We'll see what he has to say.
Design is crucial to understanding what's going on. And Harvey was the first one to think...
Okay, so he's wrong about that with regard to physicians. He is correct about that with regard to engineers. So whatever. Okay, anyway.
In Keplerian terms, Johannes Kepler had another concept. This idea of the book of nature was a metaphor that goes back to the late Middle Ages, but Kepler loved it. And it was the idea that nature is intelligible. It can be read. There's the book of Scripture that reveals the God's plan in written form, and there's the book of nature that reveals his ideas in how he made the natural world. And so Harvey was taken with this idea of what's called intelligibility. It was the watchword of these early scientists, that nature could be understood, and it could be understood for a theological reason. God had made the God who made the world in a rational, orderly way, who built design into it, also designed our minds so that we could understand the natural world, the order and the design he'd built into the world. There's a principle of correspondence. We were made in the image of God, and because of that, we could understand the
Hey,
works
Peter,
of
pause
God.
for a second. Peter, do you remember back in the early 2000s? And I mean, it occurred in the 2010s also. Do you remember when all the intelligent design advocates used to say that no, we're not affiliated with religion. We are arguing for something scientific and not
Yes.
at all dealing with theology. Do you
That,
remember that?
that there was a quite famous trial about that, wasn't it?
There
That
sure
there's
was.
Yeah, it was in Dover.
Yep.
And that's easy for me
Mhm.
to remember because if I ever want to go to the United Kingdom and I would be going by boat, I would be
Mhm.
arriving in Dover. A different Dover though, but
You're
I mean,
right. Yeah.
yeah. Kitzmiller versus Dover. There's people can look it up. Uh what was it? Intelligent design on trial?
Yeah. Hmm.
Something like that. It's
Yeah, there
on
was
YouTube.
the Nova documentary.
Yeah,
Yeah.
the Nova documentary, which is
There was also a book
a
about it,
very
which is
good
called
one.
"The Devil in Dover."
Yes.
Here, I'll put that in the side chat. "The Devil in Dover." So that's a book about the Kitzmiller v. Dover trial. Um,
And there's also a great video that Ken Miller did after the trial, explaining what happened and pretty much what they presented and why the opponents lost the entire court case and the aftermath because the judge was a Republican judge.
Bush
Uh,
appointed. Yep.
yes, was accused of all kinds of things, but even got threats because yeah, wasn't it the guy who passed away recently, Pat? Not who's the guy who's on Christian TV?
Oh, Pat Robertson.
Pat Robinson said famously that people in Dover didn't need to pray to God anymore because they just removed him from the schools.
Right. Yeah. What's so a little bit of background for anyone who's not familiar with it, and I imagine everyone who's watching this probably is, but for posterity, the trial, the Dover trial, occurred it started in 2004. It wrapped up in 2005. Um, it was on it or the trial occurred as a result of a textbook that was being used in the Dover, the parish, or sorry, not the Dover County. Sorry, parish is only in Louisiana. My apologies. Dover County or Dover School District is what it was. It was the Dover School District, and so there was a textbook being used that was titled "Of Pandas and People." That was a creationist textbook. It was a young Earth creationist textbook, and it was ruled in, I believe, it was 1987. I think it was Edwards v. Aguillard. I think Edwards v. Aguillard.
Aguilar.
Yeah, 87. Okay, so in 1987, this case was ruled that young Earth creationism is not science; it is just religion. And
Mhm.
so, any textbooks that are propounding young Earth creationism can't exist in science in public schools, right? Because it violates the Establishment Clause. So these every textbook that had creationist or creator in it had to be removed. So these people who wrote Pandas People got wise, and they just changed every instance of creationism to intelligent design, and every instance of creator to designer, and so on and so on. um, or sorry, creationists became design proponents, and that led to a famous error in the textbook where instead of the word creationists getting instead of it being replaced with like a find and replace, they accidentally uh, put in the middle of it design proponents. So it ended up being C design proponentsists. And you can actually look, I think it even has a Wikipedia page.
It's also
Proponentsist.
uh, the only time that the comparison between DNA and computer code would be accurate, because
Right.
this one had a weird mutation, the computer code, and just missed something,
Yeah, there it
which then
is.
led to the exposure.
Yep. So that was one of numerous things. And there were other things. Meyer himself wasn't in this trial. I think that was maybe a little bit before he started at the Discovery Institute. But Behe was, William Dembski was also. They were kind of the main guys who were running the, or were
Yep.
helping defend the textbook.
Didn't the Discovery Institute initially they wanted to be part of the trial, and didn't they just thought the wiser and not show up?
Do what?
The people from the Discovery Institute, they were initially asked to become witnesses in the case in favor of the Dover School Board, and they didn't participate in the trial at all.
No, they did.
It,
They participated because there was a famous. It's Richard Dawkins actually wrote about it in the God Delusion, where Behe said that there was no good evidence for the evolution of the immune system, and so the lawyer for, was it, I guess, the prosecution brought him like several textbooks and set them on the like desk in front of him, and Behe responded, "That's simply not enough." Indicating that he didn't. It wasn't about the evidence. He wasn't going to review the evidence. It just
well,
it was.
he famously said that he hadn't read any of the books, and
That's
then
what it
so
was. Yeah, he hadn't
yeah,
read them. Right.
and they
Yeah.
piled
So
book after book after book, and then scientific paper after scientific paper, and he said,
right.
I haven't read that, I haven't read that, I haven't read. So he didn't read any of it.
Right. Right.
That
Which
was
ultimately led Judge John E. Jones III to rule against the district, the school district, and they had the textbook removed because it was, and they ruled that that intelligent design was just religion, masquerading as science, which of course it is. Behe has Dr. Dan did a really good video. Hold on, let me find it. I'll put it here in the live chat. He did a really good video on intelligent design um, is just religion. Let's see, creation myths, um, intelligent design, because it's like, I can't remember. Here it is. Yeah, intelligent design isn't just creationism is the name of the video. I'm gonna put it here in our live chat, and basically there's a quote. I think believe it's from Michael Behe, in which he just says that like intelligent design is basically the way that we like interpret God's word or something like that. Which yeah, it really. I mean, intelligent design is just religion. Sorry, the point of this whole ramble I'm going on now was that there was a time when intelligent design proponents tried to argue that no, religion is not involved at all. It has nothing to do with religion. And the whole idea was intelligent design is just about the science. It's just about the cool, hard, the secular science proving God. Well, I guess I'm kind of glad that the mask has slipped on that one, and that they're now just saying, you know, God is real. You need to repent. Because there was also a thing called the Wedge document in 1999, which the Discovery Institute tried to pretend like they didn't know anything about that, which because it basically said that that they wanted to reshape the government to have Christian nationalism, which at the time wasn't good. um, it's a lot harder to find conservatives nowadays who would disagree with that. But back in the day, back in the late 90s, early 2000s, you really couldn't just say that kind of stuff openly. And so they tried to distance themselves from it to no avail. But nowadays, they're like, yeah, they actually wrote the Discovery Institute was part of Project 2025. They were on the list of groups supporting it. They subsequently removed their name, but they were on it for a little bit. I have the picture of it. So anyway, okay, we can keep going.
Yeah, I was looking who actually said that quote. Because
Which one?
my favorite quote of all time happened in this particular
Dr. Dan's video.
In the court case.
Oh, okay.
Someone said that there was the next day, and then they had to go over the material flagellum again. And the guy who was in the witness seat at that time said, first of all, the judge said, "Oh, goody," and then the guy said, "Yeah, I feel like Jascha Gabor's 10th husband. I know what to do, but I don't know how to make it interesting." I thought that was the best quote of the entire trial, but I forgot who said that. But yeah,
that's really good. I was actually trying to find. I'm sorry, I was incorrect, I think, on the person who said the quote, because now I'm trying to find well, okay, so Bruce Chapman said the goal of the Discovery Institute is to replace materialistic explanations with the theistic understanding that nature and human beings are created by God. So that's, pretty theistic. There was another one. Here it is. Sorry, it's William Dembski, not Michael Behe. My apologies. Michael Behe said, I'm sorry, I'm an idiot. William Dembski said, indeed, intelligent design is just the logos theology of John's gospel, restated in the idiom of information theory. So, intelligent design is just creationism. It's just religious. So,
yes, it is.
Yeah. So, okay. Anyway, all right, we can keep going.
And Harvey applied this in thinking about the human body and assumed that it must be some sort of design system. And so he set out to figure out what the design of the body was. And so in the process of doing his experiments, he discovered that there is this beautiful circulatory system for the blood, and the heart pumps it out, and it comes back through the veins, out through the arteries, back through the veins. And he was the first one to figure this out. I spoke yesterday about this.
It's also funny that whenever they want to say, okay, this is God's design, they come up with something that apparently is working. They will never tell you that the human backbone wasn't created to walk upright, because that's why a lot of people still have back problems. Since I have spent the last few weeks on my back, I know all about that. That's not part of God's great design for some reason. Right? All the things that go wrong with the human body.
Slip discs, not part of God's design, which is funny because, that's slip discs are because of our ancestry, right? Our notochord is broken up and then forms the intercerebral discs between our vertebrae, which, if you look at something like a lancelet, like Pikaia, or a modern lancelet, Pikaia is from the Cambrian. If you look at those guys back then, or little lancelets today, they don't have vertebra. They just have this gristly rod, which is the notochord. So that is because of our ancestry that it sucks.
Yeah, and isn't there in this God's design a particular organ that some people have to have removed? I think you know all about that.
I do happen to know all about that. Yeah, I do not have an appendix anymore. Yeah, it's it has a function that you can absolutely live without and live just fine without. I mean, I do. My life changed not at all before and after my appendectomy. I mean, I'm not recommending don't go out and get it removed if yours is working properly, but like my life didn't change at all, obviously. Like, I didn't have to change my diet or anything as a result of that. So it serves as an inoculum for your intestines, because you can't digest a lot of stuff. So instead, your gut holds bacteria that do the digesting of different materials, and they break stuff down into different sugars and whatnot. So Yep, God's design.
Yeah.
Good stuff.
Amazing, this amazing sequence of mentors here at Cambridge. That John Ray had mentored Isaac Barrow, and then of course Isaac Barrow mentored Newton, and Newton's great work, the Principia, was the work that in many ways culminated this intense period of scientific development called the Scientific Revolution. Now, in my first year working here, I was working with this same supervisor who said, if you miss Newton's theism, you've missed everything. And I got deeply interested in Newton's work on the idea of gravity because it was so mysterious. It's mysterious today. If you drop a ball and it falls to the earth, you'll say, and I used to do this to my students, why does it fall? And they would say, well, because of gravity. And I'd say, well, what is gravity? And they would say, well, it's the force that makes things fall. So yeah, but what's pushing the object down? And this was a profoundly mysterious discovery. Newton showed that what he called there was action at a distance, that the tides were being moved by the moon, and you could correlate the movement of the tides to the movement of the moon. And
yeah, not all TV hosts know this, by the way.
Oh, what do you mean?
Tide goes in, tide goes out. You can't explain this.
You got me on that one. Yeah, Bill O'Reilly with
Yes.
that one conversation between Bill O'Reilly and David Silverman produced like 2 or 3 different memes.
Mhm.
Very early like memes. It was wild. There's the one where Dave Silverman's mouth is open because he's in shock when he goes, "Tide comes in,"
Yeah.
like that became a meme. The tide goes in, tide goes out. You can't explain that. That became a meme. Like that's such a that is such a profound ignorance on the part of Bill O'Reilly. Like you can't explain why the tides go in and out. This thing we explained 300 years ago. Are
Mhm.
you serious?
Yeah.
Like what? So yeah, that one was pretty funny.
To me, that's still mind-boggling that people like that are trusted by a lot of Americans these days. I mean, why?
Yeah. I mean that interview, you would think in a rational society, that interview would be the end of your career, right? You
Yes,
would say something that stupid and everyone would be like, "Oh, I
it
guess
would
I don't need to listen to him then."
definitely
Um,
be in my country.
Unfortunately, we live in America.
Yeah.
All of us here at the Jackson Show live in America. So, so I've Peter, I've colonized you now. So,
Mhm.
is what it is. I, uh, and so in a rational country like not America, that would be the end of your career. You would hope. But in this country, we actually really appreciate and employ. And if you're really stupid, we might even make you president of the United States. So,
Yeah.
you have a lot of options here in this country. We famously like to say anybody can be president, which nobody really realized. I think that meant anybody could be president. I think we all kind of intuited that meant like anybody who's intelligent, you know, and not a sociopath and not a rapist could be president.
Mhm.
But we were wrong when they say the phrase anyone can be president. They really meant anyone can be president. So,
And another thing is the Electoral College, because that was put in place to prevent the stupidity of the people of the United States to elect someone who wasn't capable, and now look what happened.
yeah, the electoral college, you could say it initially had a function in the colonies in the early states, which fine, well and good. But now the electoral college is basically just DEI for Republicans. That's
Mhm.
all it is. It just means that a handful of states control the rest of the country, which kind of sucks. Because I live in a state that is not one of those states, as most of us do. In fact, probably the majority of the U.S. lives in states that are not the deciding factors for the election, so it's kind of ridiculous in that regard. So, that's yeah. So anyway, um, of course, I mean, you could also argue that like some of the founding fathers also probably didn't think democracy, like a true democracy, was good. They didn't want a true democracy; they wanted a representative democracy, which is what we have. But they would have argued, that only intelligent landowning people should be able to vote, not just anyone. Not everyone should be able to participate in the democratic process because you need to be an informed voter.
Hmm.
Now, obviously, I don't agree with that. I don't own land. I don't own the apartment I'm in. I'm renting. So I don't agree with that, obviously. But I do think that you should be an informed voter, which unfortunately we don't have
No.
because, as I said, we did elect a rapist who plans to destroy the economy with crushing tariffs. So there's that. Anyway,
Hmm.
okay, we can keep going.
But maybe the price of eggs will go down, Jackson. We don't know.
It won't. It
No, it
won't.
won't.
No, it sure won't.
He could even precisely describe the strength of the force that was involved with his famous equation,
That is
but
true.
neither he nor anyone else knew how this force was being transmitted across all those miles from here to the moon. It's still a mystery. We don't know what causes gravity. We can describe it mathematically. And even with new theories of gravity, they turn out to be equally mysterious. I got fascinated with this. And it turned out that Newton, though he was somewhat loath to admit it, because even at the time there were natural philosophers like the famous German Gottfried Leibniz, who didn't want to bring God directly into scientific inquiry. But it turned out that Newton actually thought that the ultimate explanation for gravity was what my supervisor called constant spirit action. If gravity acts everywhere and always, instantaneously at a distance, without material mediation, Newton thought there must be something immaterial that was
pause for a second.
Ubiquitous.
Pause for a second. I'm asking my followers, everybody who's in the live chat right now, because I am not a physicist. So correct me if I am wrong. However, isn't it the case that there are gravitons, that there are particles that mediate gravity? Isn't that the case? Brian Stevens? There are particles, aren't there? Or at the very least, there are like fields. Like there are gravitational fields. And gravity itself is the product of the fields, right? The gravitational fields? Am I incorrect on that? Yes,
lost.
gravitons. Gravity propagates at the speed of light. Yes, gravitons be a thing. Okay, so like
Maya Atkinson, go get your co-host to answer this.
So right. I thought gravitons were only theoretical. No, I agree they're theoretical. They haven't been discovered yet, but like they haven't been established to exist yet. Right. So gravitons have not been established to exist yet. I agree with that. But like the prediction based on our current theory of particles is that gravitons exist because of how gravity operates, right? Am I wrong on that? At the very least, there are gravitational fields. So the fields are a thing, right?
But
So it's not really.
Don't the gravitational fields depend on a particular amount of matter?
Right. Yeah. So on mass, right?
Yes.
Right. So on the matter that exists in the universe, these cause the bending of space-time, which is gravity. So in one sense, you can say, yeah, we don't know what like the base of gravity is, right? We don't have gravitons yet; they're still hypothetical, but they're still going to be a material thing, right? It's not. It is definitively not spirit action, right?
No.
Am I off on that?
No, I think we can rule out spirit action.
Gravity waves, based on the idea of gravity moving at the speed of light. We can see this at galactic-sized objects. Gravity affects the galaxy at the speed of light moving through the galaxy. Okay, am I incorrect in my assessment? I just want to. I don't want to say anything wrong because again, I'm not a physicist. Physics is not my background. Biology is my background. But I just want to clarify: gravity waves have been detected, so gravity definitely has to do with the warping of space-time. We don't know why mass causes space-time to deform. Okay, I get that. I understand that part. However, the warping of space-time, the curving of space-time, the field of space-time, it's modified by mass. We don't know the mechanism for inertial momentum transfers. Okay, but at its core, right, it is going to be a material thing, right? It's not going to be spirit action.
No.
You are correct mostly, but he's also kind of being weasel with his word. Okay, that's fair. Okay. Okay, and I ask you guys because I'm sure all of you know more about physics than I do. He's representing what Newton believed, not his own theory. Yeah, no, I hear you. I hope he's not saying we still think that it's spirit action. Okay. Anyway, all right, we can continue. I'm sorry, I've got us off on a
If
tangent.
it's spirit action, we shouldn't be doing this and maybe trying to piss off the spirits, and then the spirits will say, okay, we'll let gravity go.
They'll say gravity is just a theory, and then suddenly everything flies off into space.
Yes, we all fly off into space. That'll ruin Elon Musk's enterprise as well.
True.
Omnipotent throughout the whole of the universe. That was the ultimate explanation for gravity. I was fascinated with this. In the break, the Christmas vacation, which the British students called the Christmas vac, everyone went home. But Elaine's parents were desperately missing her, and so she went home for a few days at Christmas, and I stayed furiously working on my essays, including one on Newton. And one night, in the middle of the Christmas vac, it was deeply foggy. There was no one in the university. And I walked down and I sat right here in front of Newton's rooms. And I just sat and thought for about 2 hours. It's not a very great and a dramatic story, but for me it was just a poignant moment to think that I was sitting right where Newton had worked on all this. And you folks can see as you walk by on Trinity Lane or Trinity Street today, there's a wonderful apple tree that they've planted. The myth about the apple falling is probably a myth. He didn't think of the gravity because of that. But there was an apple tree at his family home in Lincolnshire, and they got a cutting from that and planted it here. There it is in front. But in the corner of that little courtyard, you can see his rooms, first floor, second floor, where he was actually working on this. And so this is fascinating because what Newton developed was actually a profound theology of nature. For him, the laws of nature were...
To me, what's fascinating is that Stephen Meyer just recalled a time in which he was thinking for 2 hours.
That's true. He did. I mean, there was really no point to that little statement. He just kind of said, I sat there and I thought for a little bit and it was foggy. And like, okay, cool.
It was
for you, I guess.
It was foggy, like Stephen Meyer's brain after this experience.
Yeah.
A mode of divine action. In fact, just as the book of nature is a metaphor that tells of the works of God, the idea of the laws of nature was also such one historian put it, a juridical metaphor of theological origins. There are laws of nature because, as John Lennox likes to say, and he'll be with us tomorrow, there are laws of nature because there was a lawgiver, there was a divine legislator.
That does not mean
what Newton thought the laws of nature was a mode of divine action, like in the book of Hebrews where it says he sustains the universe by the word of his power. The regular concourse of nature was a consequence of the handiwork of God, the constant supervision of God over the natural world he designed.
So is God constantly moving the planets around?
What surprises me, Jackson, is if what he just said is true, then how come we have had no scientific finding that was started in the Bible, that was explained in the Bible. Because everything we know about the natural world, none of it came from the Bible. None of it came from God's word. Why is he saying, okay, this all points to, it all points to, but the only thing we have apparently uh, close enough to God's word is the Bible, and the Bible doesn't explain anything. On the contrary, it gets all of it wrong.
Yeah, I attended mass with Camilla recently, and I was thinking about something that was in the homily. It made me think about made me realize something because I read a book recently which is titled 1177 BC: The Earth Civilization Collapsed. It's a really good book by Eric Klein. Highly recommend 1177 BC. And in this book, he talks about the fall of a lot of the major empires in the Eastern Mediterranean. And traditionally, the fall of the Bronze Age collapse, the collapse of these empires, was kind of traditionally attributed to what was called the Sea People. So a bunch of groups of people coming out of the Western Mediterranean who just kind of swept in and destroyed these civilizations. But there's not really good evidence for that. And these people, the people who came from the Western Mediterranean, the Sea People, which included like the Philistines, for instance, um, some of them did in fact make the trip to the Eastern Mediterranean. They sailed across and landed in the Eastern Mediterranean, but they didn't really destroy the empires that were already there. There was a 300-year long drought that was going on, and that disrupted the granaries and the trade routes, and that's really what caused the fall of these empires. So the point is that the the biblical passage that they picked for this particular homily was about the birth of Samson, and it mentions the Philistines in it, and it kind of made me think. Kind of made me think back to the book 1177 BC because there's a lot of overlap in time uh, with the kind of initial adventures of the Israelites in what would eventually become Israel, so the land of Canaan that would be taken over and then transformed into Israel. And what's funny about that is the cities where there are claimed by the Israelites to have been these major battles, like Megiddo and Jericho, really don't have any evidence that any of those battles happened. We just don't have any evidence for that. There's no evidence that these huge battles took place. There's no evidence that the Exodus happened. There's no evidence that the earth was created in 6 days, 6 to 10,000 years ago. There's no evidence for a global flood. There's no evidence for the Tower of Babel. As Peter just said, all these events are without evidence.
Mm-hmm.
Maybe some of them happened, but we don't have any evidence for it. We have no archaeological record of most of these things. We have no there's just no geological evidence. There's nothing for a lot of these events. So we're just kind of relying on the Bible's telling of these things. And if you want to believe in that, that's fine. That's fine. There's no reason, or there's no harm in having those beliefs. But like, the Bible's not a history book. It's not a scientific textbook. It's just a book about a group of people who lived in the Eastern Mediterranean at a particular time in history, and the rules that they had to govern themselves, and their narratives about the world. That's what the Bible's about, right? And so, like, if you want to believe it and you want to say, like, hey, it's got some great stories in it and it's got some great rules to follow, every so often when you're not, murdering people because they gathered sticks on the Sabbath or what have you, like it's just a book. It's a book about book. It's a book of books of the culture of a group of people who lived at a particular time in a particular place in the world.
And they tried to make sense of the world that they were living in, and they did their best with the tools that they had back then.
Exactly right. Yeah, and so like kind of at the end of the day, it's just a book. It's just a book of books, and there's some neat stuff in there, but it's and like I don't know, reading about the history of like the Bible and the what goes into and that sort of stuff. It's like it's neat, but but why, if the Bible is this divinely authored text that is supposed to guide us not just on the past, but on how we should live presently and what's going to happen in the future, why is it so thin
Mm-hmm.
on like actual information about reality, right?
Yep.
Why does it tell us nothing about about physics or biology or chemistry or math? Like God, an omnipotent being could have written the Bible in such a way that it could never be misinterpreted by anyone. That's
Yep.
possible.
And
It could have been written like
he would have put us in some nuggets to help us along, so we
you
could,
would think.
right?
Like, hey, wash your hands because you can get these little things called like viruses and
Mm-hmm.
bacteria on your hands, and then when you eat food that you didn't cook, you can transfer bacteria to your hands and into your mouth, or vice versa. You can get like nematodes from pork that's undercooked. There's if you drink water that isn't treated, or it comes from certain areas where people are
Reminding me
defecating.
of a brilliant thing that happened to me a few days ago. I was uh, on a creationist website, and a woman joined, and at some point she says, uh, "It's not what goes into your mouth that defiles you." And so I replied, "Is that a proposal, someone? I mean, I don't know. I don't know what you're trying to express here, but you might want to rephrase that a little. It's coming
Right.
from a woman. But also, do you know the thing that happens to a person where you think, hey, squirrel?
Uh-huh.
I don't know what it's called. So Brian Stevens made a comment, and he said, "You mean the genealogy section doesn't explain relativity?"
Right.
It should, because genealogy is all about who were your relatives. So why isn't it called relativity instead of genealogy? English is a weird language.
Wow. Wow.
I
Thank
mean,
you.
yes, it's the same thing. So you have an asteroid, which is something that slams into a planet, and then you have hemorrhoids. Those should be switched too, I guess. I don't know. Just
I'll consider that. I'll get in touch with the writers of English and we'll get that
yes,
sorted out.
they got the words wrong.
But yeah, so in theory, an all-powerful, all-knowing being could write a book that wouldn't be subject to interpretation and wouldn't be the historical encounters of a small group of people living at one particular time in history. Like, if this book is supposed to be the book for all of mankind, for all of history, it kind of sucks at being that. It's fine if you just want to know about people who lived in, the Near East in like,
Well,
2,000 years ago. It's
I
fine at doing that,
I
but
have to retract one thing. So there
okay.
was one thing that was mentioned in the Bible, but now all Christians are going to ignore that particular verse. And it is in Ecclesiastes, if I'm correct, and people can go look it up, where God says humans are animals, but
Right.
they won't admit to that because of their pride. That's the only
That's
thing
right.
it got right.
Humans are animals, and to dust we will return. Yeah.
Yes. So
All right, we can keep going.
But Newton also made beautiful design arguments. And this is a passage from the General Scholium to the Principia, which was his theological epilogue to the greatest work of science ever written.
I have to pause because Brian Stevens is going to make my day. You only get hemorrhoids when the asteroid slams into Uranus. Yeah,
Thank you.
I should have the badum tish ready for this. I don't have my
We need a
soundboard on this one.
soundboard.
Yeah,
Yeah,
I
that's
have
what we
that.
need.
I have that on my soundboard, but my soundboard's not connected to this particular show. Yeah.
Okay.
Thank
Gotcha.
you for that, Brian Stevens.
A number of years ago, I had an opportunity to testify before the United States Commission on Civil Rights, and they were investigating whether or not there was viewpoint discrimination in the teaching of biological origins. When I was summoned for this, I just had to laugh. It was obvious if anyone had read a biology textbutthurt. There was only one theory of biological origin taught, and it was Darwin's theory.
He's so...
Anyway, I gave my testimony.
He's so butthurt. Oh my gosh, he is so butthurt. Can you imagine being as butthurt as him? I can't. I genuinely can't. These people failed. They failed at the Dover trial, and then Meyer has for years at this point whined about how he didn't, about how this paper that that his friend Richard Sternberg ran through and didn't fact check, or sorry, didn't peer review, I should say, didn't get it peer reviewed, how he let it into a journal, and then it got subsequently retracted because, you know, it wasn't peer reviewed. It was being put in a journal that was supposed to be peer reviewed. And he's so butthurt. He's just so butthurt about it. It's really pathetic. He is just a pathetic man. We can keep going.
I do think there is a God, because we were just talking about hemorrhoids, and the next thing happens is even my being butthurt.
Correct.
For some reason, he continued to joke without knowing.
And I talked a bit about intelligent design. And one of the commissioners said, well, isn't this idea of intelligent design very similar to what the early scientists, like Kepler and Galileo and Newton thought? And then when I heard Newton's name, I brightened. I said, well, yes, of course. And I started to talk about it. And my opposite number interrupted me and said, well, what young Dr. Meyer, and I was younger then, what young Dr. Meyer has said is right. Newton was very religious, but he took great pains to keep his science out of his religious beliefs out. She said he took great pains to keep his religious beliefs about intelligent design out of his scientific work. And I had just written an essay on Newton's understanding of gravity and his design arguments. And on the front page of that essay, I had the block quote that's on the screen. And so I nearly memorized it. And I said, well, that's not true. In the General Scholium to the Principia, arguably the greatest work of physics ever written, and that sounded pretty impressive, I think, you know, the General Scholium. And General Scholium just means introduction, but no one there knew that. So, you know, actually it was more like an epilogue. And so I quoted this, and it's a beautiful quotation. He was talking about the design of the solar system. And he said, though these bodies may indeed continue in their orbits by the mere laws of gravity, yet they could by no means have first derived the regular position of the orbits themselves from those laws.
And yet they did. So.
Thus, this most beautiful system of sun, planets, and comets could only proceed from the counsel and dominion of an intelligent and powerful being.
Pause for a second.
Capital B.
So, okay. So we have to remember, again, Newton lived 300 years ago before any of what we knew about, before most of what we knew about physics, before most of what we knew about astronomy, before most of what we knew about really any of the sciences. And so him saying, I mean, he also had no idea for how Mercury, what was it, orbited the sun? What was it? He didn't understand. Was it Mercury's orbit? Remind me, Brian, was it Newton didn't have an explanation for Mercury's orbit, wasn't it? Newton orbit. Which one was it? Was it Mercury's orbit? Yeah, Newton's gravitation was unable to account for Mercury's orbit. That's what it was. Yeah. So while it is true, yeah, that's what it was. Okay. So while it is true that Newton is obviously brilliant, you know, he wrote Principia, which is this extraordinary work that lays out, you know, calculus, or a bunch of rules of calculus and the laws of physics, the first, second, third laws of Newtonian physics, as well as the law of gravitation. Like, these are obviously extremely important. He did also live a long time ago, before we had a greater knowledge of our solar system and of the universe. And the same is true of Darwin, right? Darwin got a lot of stuff right. He also got some stuff wrong, and there's a lot of stuff we have nowadays that he couldn't have possibly foreseen. And so, like, give these people the credit that they're due, but also he's kind of talking out of his butt here. So, yeah.
It's weird how every creationist will stop at points in the past, preferably a few hundred years ago, and think that that was the pinnacle of science, and we learned nothing after that.
Correct.
Then the commissioners all sort of smiled, like, "Oh, this is going to be a lot more interesting than we thought. This intelligent design idea may be completely a crackpot, but there's no denying that it played a role in the history of science." And it continued to play that role even here in Cambridge. We talked about James Clerk Maxwell just a little bit yesterday, and again, I would highlight this beautiful door on the Cavendish, the original Cavendish laboratory. And you can see it, it's on Free School Lane. It was just a few hundred steps from the front door of the department where I was studying. So when I felt outnumbered among my colleagues, my contemporary colleagues, I would gain encouragement by walking down the street and seeing that, well, some pretty great scientists had the same worldview that I did. And on the door, you can see this wonderful inscription. It's in the Latin, but you can make it out. And it says, the translation is, "Great are the works of the Lord, sought out by all who take pleasure therein." What is Maxwell saying? This is the motivation for doing science. We want to bring glory to God.
Cool.
So
Good for him.
that was
Cool.
the Christian origins of modern science, and that perspective continued into the 19th century. But during the 19th century, especially the late 19th century, there began to be a dramatic shift. And that too was presaged by work that took place here in Cambridge. Charles Darwin was here right before his voyage on the Beagle, and he was studying theology. He read William Paley and his works on natural theology, but one of his he was also doing natural history, and one of his natural history professors named Henslow suggested that they take up this voyage on the Beagle. And while he was there, his ideas about the origin of species, his theory of evolution by natural selection, began to germinate. And then years later, in 1859, he publishes that work. Darwin, when he was here, was at Christ College, just walking distance from where we are.
That's what it was.
Just a little bit north. If you head out, you type it in your Google Maps, you'll be able to find the entrance. The college is often open. There are many plaques to Darwin there, and also through the first courtyard and up the stairs is the room where he was. So
a person you hate, by the way.
A very important figure. And what was important about Darwinism was
Myers
that it
hates Darwin.
Yeah, I actually like that he pointed out that he was at Christ's College.
Yeah, because Darwin was a Christian when he, when he developed much of his work on evolution. He was a Christian. He was not an atheist. He was not a materialist. He never called himself an atheist at any point in his life. Never. And it pains Stephen Meyer that that's true. He hates that fact. He hates Darwin because Darwin provided a mechanistic explanation for biodiversity that had no need for God. There was no need for God. You have variations. Those variations are acted upon by natural selection because they exist in an environment, and individuals with certain variations are more likely to survive and pass those variations on to their offspring. And that's evolution. Populations divide and speciate according to their habitat. So I wonder how he's going to spin this. I wonder. And we only have a few minutes left, so we'll get a little bit more in here, and then we'll call it.
Not only was a theory of how life changed, but it was a theory of how life changed in a completely undirected and unguided way. So one of our American textbooks that is completely not biased in any way says this, it puts it this way, it says, by coupling the undirected purposeless variations to the blind, uncaring process of natural selection, Darwin made theological or spiritual explanations of life superfluous, unnecessary.
I mean, that's true.
And so with Darwinism, we get this rise of what sometimes was called scientific materialism or atheism, and with the idea that there's no guiding hand behind evolution. It's not theistic evolution. It's not teleological. There's no purpose behind it. It's a completely undirected, unguided process.
Here, what I want to point out is is a Stephen Meyer is opposed to all evolution, right? Now he's talking about teleological evolution here, but he doesn't believe in that either. He does not believe in any kind of biological evolution, right? And if you read his works, all he does is argue against biological evolution. So this is quite silly. This is a silly argument. Uh, sorry, I was just reading our
And also, you're going to be hard pressed to find someone who claims I'm an atheist because of evolution.
right.
Because it has nothing to do with being an atheist. Being an atheist is because you don't see enough evidence for there being a God. That's it.
Mm-hmm.
It's nothing to do. Even if the whole theory of evolution would collapse tomorrow and would be proven wrong, it would do nothing to make atheists become Christian.
Mm-hmm.
Doesn't work that way. But Christians.
Yes. And that, as Richard Dawkins would later say, made it possible to be an intellectually fulfilled atheist. We can now explain the appearance of design in living organisms as a result of an unguided, undirected process, and therefore there was no need to invoke a designing intelligence or a creator of any
Pause for a
kind.
second.
He was.
So, okay, notice what Meyer's doing here. He's saying that science shows God does not exist. That's not true. Science does not show God does not exist. That's not the function of science. The point of science is merely to show how we can explain things with mechanistic processes. If you can't show that something is operating via a mechanistic process, then you can't do science on it. That's just simply how that works. I mean, Dawkins' quote is irrelevant and immaterial here. I know that creationists like Meyer love it because they can say, "Ooh, if you're an evolutionist, you're also an atheist." But that's just simply not true. There are more Christians who accept evolution than there are Christians who accept creationism or intelligent design, for that matter. So it's just silly.
Oh.
Later, Dawkins has been quoted most famously in his book, The Blind Watchmaker, saying that biology is the study of complicated things that give the appearance of having been designed for a purpose, where the key word is appearance, the illusion. Why is it an illusion?
It is an illusion.
Because there's this unguided, undirected process called natural selection that can produce the appearance of design without being guided or directed in any way. It can mimic, it's often said, the powers of a designing intelligence, but it's not intelligent. There's no intelligence allowed. And so this perspective has given rise to a lot of intellectually fulfilled atheists, and many of them are kind of very popular, and they've had a very strong voice in the culture. Lawrence Krauss.
And you have,
unfortunately, even Stephen Hawking got into this act late in his life. Bill Nye, the science guy, even though he's not a scientist, and then the really great physicist Steven Weinberg have all been exponents of this idea.
I just want to point out, Bill Nye has never said he's a scientist. That's why he calls himself the science guy. Also, Stephen Meyer is not a scientist. He has no, what is it? I think he has I think his bachelor's is in geology, and I believe he worked for, was it like an oil company or something for a while? And then he went off and is now working with the Discovery Institute. But he's not a scientist. He never was a scientist. He got a bachelor's degree in a science, and then he became a philosopher. So he is not, nor has he ever been a scientist. So him going around saying, "Oh, Bill Nye is not a scientist," okay, neither are you. So what do you care?
Mm-hmm.
I'm sorry. It's very funny. It's very petty. I'd never heard that before. That kind of piqued my interest. Did you hear him say, "Unfortunately, Stephen Hawking got into this"?
Yes, unfortunately.
I've never heard them say because Hawking has pretty much always been non-religious, as near as I can tell. So it was very interesting to hear him say that. I've never even heard of this book, The Grand Design. I've never heard of that book.
I think Hawking also never spoke about whether or not he was religious, and maybe that's what led people to believe that he was religious and that there might still be a way that he was on their side because they need people on their side, and the amount of scientists that are overtly Christian and are doing things in either cosmology or biology is getting less and less. So
Yeah. It is really funny that the first person who comes up um under critical reactions is John Lennox, who is also a creationist, by the way.
mhm.
So that's kind of funny.
And a
Don't really care about
mathematician,
his.
if I'm not mistaken.
Yep. Yeah. Positive reactions. Well, it says evolutionary biologist Richard Dawkins, Sean Carroll, Lawrence Krauss. I don't really know who the rest of these people are. Um, Whatever. Anyway, so yeah, this book, The Grand Design, actually, listen to this. In response to criticism, Hawking said, "One can't prove that God doesn't exist, but science makes God unnecessary." And so, what Meyer is saying here is that science has removed God, but which basically, I mean, you just don't need God to explain things. Adding
No.
God to any scientific hypothesis is just profligate, right? It's just unnecessarily cumbersome, right? Saying evolution produced life is one hypothesis, then saying evolution plus God produced life. Well, if both of those hypotheses explain the same amount of data, then per Occam's razor, the hypothesis that has fewer unnecessary assumptions is more likely to be correct. So,
Yes.
of evolution and evolution plus God, evolution is the one that's more likely to be true. Doesn't necessarily mean that there is no God. It just means that all we can know in terms of science is that evolution is true. So, okay, well, we're past 9 o'clock. We're past 9 o'clock my time now. So, if you want to pull us back out, um, so basically, um, nothing new here from Stephen Meyer so far. He's just kind
No.
of whining. He's just crying about all those mean old atheists who are, in charge of the universities and the journals, and they never let us publish our crap. I mean, intelligent design in the journals or in the school textbooks. So, big
And
sad.
and what is worse, he thought for 2 hours and we still don't know what he thought about.
Yeah. So, well, thank you, Peter, for being here with me. I do want to say,
For the
and
delay
also
and
thank
all
you
the
to everybody.
difficulties.
It's okay. We still made it. Um, so thank you also everybody for watching. The Rotifer's Tale, I will be working on that very soon because I had to finish another chapter in the Rocks Were There, Volume 2 before I would start on it. I'm trying to like stagger these projects so I can get Rocks Volume 2 done with RJ. We only have I only have to write 2 more chapters, and then I kick them over to him, and he edits and adds all his additions, and then I read those over, send them back to him, and then we'll be done. So it'll be done next year. So I'm very excited. And so Rotifer's Tale, we've been working on that in the near future, and so I should be getting that underway pretty soon. So the next video in the Ancestors Tale series, so we can finally be done with the Ancestors Tale. It's coming. So, well, thank you everybody for watching, and we will see all of you. Hold on, actually, hold on. I probably won't see you next week. Next week, Thursday is the 26th, and I think I have a work Christmas function, so I probably won't see you guys on the 26th. I'm saying just tentatively, probably won't see you guys then. So we'll reconvene most likely
Oh,
on
you froze.
January 2nd. Oh no, clear. There we go.
Which
So we'll
which is kind of
reconvene.
which is so the 26th, that's not a special day in the US because in the UK it's called Boxing Day.
Boxing Day.
In the
No,
Netherlands, it's called Second Christmas Day. We've got 2 Christmas days and Christmas Eve.
oh,
You'd think
Well, I'm not a member of the Coptic Church or the Eastern Orthodox Church.
But you'd
So
think that a Christian nation like the United States would have 3 Christmas days at least. I mean,
it,
what's Mariah Carey
nobody
going
has
to
money
do
for
the
that.
rest of the year?
Nobody has money for that. I can't possibly do it. Do you want to say? Oh, is this? Okay. Um, it is also the first day of Kwanzaa, which, from what I understand of Kwanzaa, it was a holiday that was intended. Yet happy Hangover Day. Very true, Katina. Um, if I remember correctly, I believe Kwanzaa was intended to be a sort of like Pan African celebration here in the U.S., but really nobody ended up celebrating it, so it just kind of fell by the wayside. Which is funny because everybody's heard of it. Everybody's heard of Kwanzaa, but it seems that nobody really celebrates Kwanzaa, at least as it was intentionally
I,
designed. So
I know exactly when I first heard of it. It was
okay,
in a sitcom called Everybody Hates Chris. And there was a
okay.
famous episode in which the mother explained, "We're not going to celebrate Christmas this year. We're going to celebrate Kwanzaa." And I
Mm.
think the total response within that episode is why no one celebrates it, because it does away with the presents.
Yeah, is that right? Okay, well, I didn't know
So
that.
the kids
I don't
didn't
remember
like it.
much about it. I just remember that it was sort of a celebration of kind of like Pan-Africanism, just a celebration of heritage and culture, and that's cool and fine. I just don't think it ever really caught on. Or there were attempts to have it, but just kind of fell away. So anyway, all right. So well, thank you everybody for watching. So
One
we'll see you guys in 2 weeks.
one more
Oh,
thing, Big Bad
yes.
Mama, you're too late. We're just ending.
Welcome, Big Bad Mama. But we are
So
heading out.
so for
So
people who don't know and people who follow Kent Hovind closely, um, Big Bad Mama might be related to creationist Crybaby, a famous troll on Hovind's channel who has recently appeared talking to Hovind a lot. And I like those videos. So if you're not subscribed to Big Bad Mama, please subscribe and watch his Hovind videos, because it's a different way of approaching Hovind. And I like the style.
okay. Well, all right, everybody. Well, we are going to head out, and we will see all of you in 2 weeks. So January 2nd is when we should see all of you again. So thank you, everybody, for coming, and we will see you next time. So
Happy New
bye,
Year.
everybody. Happy New Year.
Okay, hang on so fast. Again, my sincere apologies for all the technical stuff. I have no clue what happened. Usually when I have an update, it's not messing with everything like it did now. But it also had, so in an update, the computer will restart once. This time it restarted twice, so I have no clue what was different. But I have no clue how to get my camera back working. So, which is weird. Because I disabled it and then re-enabled it, and that didn't work. I have no clue why this happened. But how many chapters do you have left?